Okie dokie. Welcome back, Idiot Squared viewers. Today we have a fantastic episode. We're continuing on with our Awakening series. Today we'll be discussing a talk given by Dr. Shiva about how the few control the many. We'll also be discussing a book and a talk by Dr. Shiva. No, not Dr. Shiva. Dr. Sandra Navidi called Super Hubs and how essentially the few control the many. Same kind of concepts. We're going to weave them together. She uses a lot of network science. Dr. Shiva uses a lot of other words. And we're going to jump straight into it. Polsker, I sent you some links. You've had a look. You've had a bit of a read. What do you think?
I think Dr. Shiva's onto some shit, dude. He talks about this swarm intelligence, right? It's not particularly an individual or a group of individuals that are, essentially controlling the world. Is much more of like a network sort of thing going on, and he refers to it as a swarm intelligence. So I got a clip of Dr. Shiva explaining it better than I can. So I'll play like the first minute and a half, and then we can discuss. All right, here we go.
Everyone, it's Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. How a very small set of people control 8 billion people. This is what I call the elites. Let's say there's about 10,000 of them. How is it these people are able to manipulate the 8 billion people here? If you talk to a lot of naive people, they think, oh, it's the Rothschilds over here, or it's the aliens. They don't understand. It's not any one individual. It's not any one organization. There's something called swarm intelligence. If you watch all those birds flying together, not any one of them is in control. They move together as a unit. They're closely knit. They're quote unquote telepathic, but they move with a singular goal. The goal of the elites here is power, profit, and control. This is the goal. So if we look at it from a control system, what are the inputs they're sending into this system to achieve their goals? And what is the output that they seek? So if you're an elite over here and you're looking at those 8 billion people, how do you know you're achieving your goal? Are people getting fat, meaning unhealthy? Are people getting dumb, which means ignorant? Are people happy, which means are they being entertained? Are people divided? Are they isolated, disconnected? They don't want people here connecting with each other. Are people feeling helpless? Are people looking to the elites to save them? And they like that. They like when people here are looking to them, the enemy here, for their saviors. They really love that. They want people to be disorganized, and they definitely want people to be helpless. This is what they want. If you do not want to unite among people here and find who your own leaders are from below, they are quite happy. They're achieving their goal.
What do you think, Guy? They're keeping us fat, happy, and stupid.
Yeah, well, I think you can see that is definitely something that has been on the rise. But it's a really interesting point, and again, like I think this is what's obvious now, and when the way you look at it, it's obvious that this does happen, and yes, it can be a bad thing. I think it's proving to be, especially when the power gets out of control, so to speak, or it gets too in control. That's probably a better way to say it. When the power gets too in control, then it has these negative sort of feedback loops. But yeah, no, like I really think he's onto something. I also like there's the talk by Sandra Navidi. And she talks about super hubs, which is this network sort of approach to it. So this is more like this graphical, like the Wolfram Physics Project kind of style way of looking at it. And I think these two things mesh together really well. But specifically to the points that Dr. Shiva raised in that little clip just there, this is how it happens. Like all you need to do is just look at a government and realize that, there's less people in the government than there are of the people that they govern, right? So the government is the few putting in a control, or the many putting a control structure in to control the many. But with the governments, that is few people controlling the masses, and you can see that sometimes it does things that are beneficial, but other times it doesn't. And when these things are corrupted or the incentives are not aligned, then the many do suffer. And it's just, this is endlessly fascinating to me, and has been for quite a while. But I think that what we're going to discuss today kind of provides a way to look at it, a framework to look at it, a framework to understand it to a higher degree, and to really take some proactive things from it. Like there's actually actionable things that we can take away from this by looking at it. And I just want to preface this with the goal of this isn't to get angry or upset or to be like, oh, damn, those elite ruling us, et cetera, et cetera. That's falling into the blame trap. And we don't want to do that, because whenever we blame, we give power to them. And whenever we take ownership, we empower ourselves. So I want to look at this through the lens of ownership. Like, with knowing this, what can we do to take ownership and to better improve our circumstances and the circumstances for others, essentially. So I've got a couple of key points that we can hit on, unless you wanted to go deeper into that clip.
I just wanted to say one thing before you get into your points, Guy, is that the tactic that the elites are using, they're essentially using this network concept, right? And if people came together and used a similar type of concept, we could actually use their own concept against them, because essentially it's working. Their concept is working because it's getting us divided, right? Left versus right, races against each other, you name it. This fabrication of divide that's occurring in our society, because I don't think that we are as divided as it may seem. But when you go online, when you see shit on the media, on TV, it seems like this division is the worst it's ever been. I generally don't think that that's the case, but this fabricated division that's occurring is actually creating divide. And that's exactly what these elites are benefiting from, because, it doesn't matter if you're anti-woke or woke and you have a business gearing towards, like being anti-woke, or have a business geared towards being woke. The elite are still making the money. They're making money off of the anti-woke establishment, and they're also making money off of the woke establishment. So all that bullshit, all that noise that's occurring at like this bottom level, which is like us, is actually benefiting them. And once we realize that that's what's occurring and we need to form a network amongst ourselves, we can then begin to use their concept against them. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Also understanding that woke is a mind virus, right? Like, it's a mind virus that's disseminated by the few into the many, specifically to divide. And like, we could call this another thing, which is like, introduction to the dark arts, where you just want to become aware of these things so that you have some defenses against it, right? The first thing is to realize that these tactics exist, and that like they are used in certain ways, and so you want to learn how to have defenses against it. You want to learn how to be able to resist or critically think your way through these kinds of things. So I'll read some points, just some key points from Dr. Shiva's talk. If anything is interesting or piques your brain or whatever, interrupt me and we can go further into it. He does refer to the swarm as an interconnected, decentralized group of elites that control society, including obvious establishment figures we see in the news, as well as less obvious ones. And he mentions Robert Kennedy, Trump, and Bernie Sanders, as well as like your Pelosi's and your Mitch McConnell's. Is he an alien or not? Those kinds of people, right? He then goes on to mention how swarms implement policies over decades that tend to have negative impact on public health, resulting in declining lifespans, obesity, immune system destruction, etc. Examples that he uses are the lockdowns, the Monsanto Protection Act, the healthcare middlemen, income inequality, and factory farming. These policies create biological triggers like stress, loneliness, poor nutrition. The triggers disrupt key molecular pathways in the body: mitochondrial function, autophagy, antioxidants, inflammation. This leads to death and disease. Now, the reason why I think he brings up that, obviously he's a doctor, but it also illuminates some other things, which is what's a great way to make money from a lot of people. And one way to make a lot of money from a lot of people is to have them sick, essentially, requiring treatments, requiring medications. we have this power structure or trust structure that's been built up over time, which is a whole nother podcast in and of itself, about the medical industrial complex and doctors and the trust that's been bestowed upon them, and how trusting people are to doctors. You know, like if a doctor says you've got to do this or you've got to take that, or here's your prescription for these tablets that you got to be on for the rest of your life, a lot of people just adhere to that because they want their problem solved. And the crazy thing about life is we as people, we do want the path of least resistance. And, you know, it's a lot easier to keep doing what you're doing and then just take a tablet than it is to completely change the way you live your life and the way you nourish your body and the habits and things you do with it. So one little thing that comes into my mind there is like, you know, how much of it is the system versus how much of it is the people. And you can essentially look at it in two different ways, which is it's all the system and it's all their fault. Or you can look at it as it's the people and it's all their fault. And the answer is like somewhere in the middle, right? Like each person or all of us as individuals could, you know, better educate ourselves, better equip ourselves to handle these kinds of things, knowing that the establishment or these big power structures are going to try and do that. And it's our job to resist, so to speak, or to be able to better navigate these circumstances. And that's the approach that, you know, I think we both like and that we can focus on. So the next couple of points he brings up is elites in both establishment parties have contributed to these bad policies over 50 plus years. And that's just I just want to bring up, that's just this cycle, right? This has happened time immemorial, right? These are cycles that continuously repeat, just at different scales and different times. So the not so obvious establishment pretends to help the people, but actually works with the obvious establishment. So that was a key point. He actually mentions that there is the obvious establishment, which is like your governments and the sort of front people, and then you have the not so obvious establishment, which is like the private businesses behind the scenes and key players. So he says the only solution is for the masses to shatter the swarm by awakening, avoiding false heroes like the people presented to us, such as Trump, Kennedy, Biden, and these other people. Well, he specifically mentions Trump and Kennedy, but we need to add in Biden and anyone else, right? Your Obamas, all of these people, and become local leaders. Dr. Shiva positions himself as the real leader fighting the elite swarm, which I highly doubt, because that's just, you know, swap one person in for another one. The real answer is for us individually to become, like what he said, local leaders, for all of us to start awakening and questioning things and how we go about it. Dr. Shiva is running for president to educate the people on the elite swarm, restore truth and freedom by shattering their control systems and empower decentralized local leadership. He sees himself as the anti-elite figure.
He's running for president?
Yeah.
Like president of the United States?
President of the United States of America.
Really? Is he running like the next presidency?
2024, bro. 2024.
What the fuck? I didn't even hear about him running or anything. Like the first time I heard about him was when you sent me that video.
Yeah, I don't think he's got a big campaign. I just thought it was interesting what he was discussing because it was an interesting lens. And again, with this Wolfram stuff and a bunch of other things, it sort of was like, oh, okay, I can think about this from a network standpoint.
Damn,
right?
we got a lot of...
You go.
No, sorry. Finish your point.
I was just going to say, it's interesting how, you know, a smaller system can control a larger system if that smaller system is sort of more organized and can project power, right? And become interconnected. How interconnected can that little system get to the big system? And if it can get very interconnected into the larger system, then it can elicit power over that system, essentially. It can control.
Yeah, and I mean, they're largely incentivized to do so. The amount of money that they're fucking making is incredible. So they're very, very much so incentivized to keep that organization going. Whereas normal people, like, it's very hard for us to get organized, right? Especially with all this fabricated divide that's occurring. Yeah, that's occurring. So it just makes it really difficult. And because they're infiltrated into the school system, pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, They're even in YouTube and Facebook and, all the big media companies, sports, like you name it, they have an influence over that, right?
That's it.
Yeah, like even like let's talk about Rogan for a second, right? Like Rogan, he talks about anti-establishment shit, but at the end of the day, he's still part of the system in one way or another. He's on a platform, right? So, and that platform is being used by many, many people, but they're being used by sets of computers and networks, and people are consuming that that content, right? And all of that sort of under the umbrella of the elites, anyways. So it might seem like, oh, he's not a part of it, and him individually, like I guess he sort of isn't, but the platform that he is on is indirectly a part of the system, right? In a way.
Absolutely. Well,
I kind of fucked up the explanation.
No, what you said is good. The system is the means of distribution, really, right? Like, so you sort of have to play in the game. And there's others, like you got your Rumbles and stuff like that, and they're emerging, but they don't have the interconnectedness like the YouTubes do or other platforms.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that so many anti-establishment people are coming out of the woodwork recently, like Vivek Rama, what's his last name?
I don't know. I can't pronounce it, but yeah, Vivek. He's running for president.
Yeah, apparently it's Vivek. Like
Vivek, sorry.
Vivek. I just learned that the other day on Full Send podcast. He was on there, and Kyle was like, "So how do you say her name?" And he was like, "Vivek." Like cake. That's what he said. But it's just funny how there's so many anti-establishment people coming out now. And, like this Dr. Shiva guy as well. He seems like an anti-establishment guy. He's running for president. Trump, anti-establishment in a way, right? Vivek, anti-establishment. RFK, anti-establishment. Have we seen this many people running for presidency that are anti-establishment in the past? Like in recent times anyways?
Well,
it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So, okay. I don't know whether or not there is more or less, whether we seem to be seeing more, and whether that's because of a change in the way that we consume information. Like previously you might not have seen it because it was just the news that was disseminating this information, and they might not have given airtime to anyone else. Whereas now we have, social medias and video sharing, YouTube and other platforms like that. So now maybe we get more access to it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, like, the anti-establishment is running to be in the establishment. And that's kind of how it has to be. Shiva is anti-establishment, yet he's running to be the leader of a giant establishment. So there's some contradictions in all of that. And I'm not saying we should get rid of all the we should get rid of all the establishments. I'm not saying that. I think that we need some. Like the thing is, it's not about all chaos and it's not about all order and control. It's about a balance between the two. And there is this beautiful sweet spot where magic really can happen. And I think that's the case. I think the reason we might be seeing a bit more of this is because the control mechanisms have got so strong and so far-reaching and so pervasive in the system that this is a sort of natural pushback against that, right? And we part of us doing this pod is to try and help other people become aware of these things so that the few don't get complete control over the many. There has to be a balance between it. And so there always will be a tension between, the few and the many in that regard. But it's up to the many to better align that system to benefit more people, I think. And we can. We have amazing breakthroughs in technology, and we have so many things that could increase abundance. And we should be focusing on that instead of trying to, overly control the system and again, robbing the many just to enrich the rich so that they can get more and more control. Right? There is the balance between the two. Okay, so Dr. Shiva's talk was interesting. I liked the way that he framed that. Again, we'll have the link for that talk in the description so you can go and check it out. I don't believe everything he says, but I think he provides an interesting lens to look at it through. Okay, and he does outline a bunch of the mechanisms, like how elites or the few use policies and other acts and different things like that to control the few. But then there's another talk given by Sandra Navidi, and she wrote a book called Super Hubs, which is fantastic. I read it a few years ago. I don't know if you've read it.
No, I haven't read it. Yo, Roops, sorry to interrupt, but before you get to that, I'm actually mad curious. What parts of Dr. Shiva's video there did you not agree with? Because you said there were certain things that you weren't on board with. So I'm mad curious to know what those things are.
Oh, okay. So essentially what he was saying, well, to me, what I sort of took from it was he's telling you that like almost everyone is bad except him. and fundamentally, I don't know him. I'm not going to just blindly trust him that like, just because he's saying a bunch of stuff that I agree with and can see means that he's going to be any different, if that makes sense. He also ousts, like, he ousted, Robert F. Kennedy, Trump, Rogan, and these other people as being, fake for the people, but really they're just establishment people.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily agree with that. And I also think that, obviously we're all biased in some way, shape or form, but I think he, obviously he's running for president, so he's got a vested interest to try and over dramatize certain things and to make it seem more like, a bit of a conspiracy as opposed to just like, this is an emergent phenomena, or even maybe an intrinsic or natural phenomena for systems. All right. Like, I think it's inevitable that in a system, you will have some parts of that system that try to control other parts of the system. Right. And if a big part of that system don't really care, well, then it makes it easier for the smaller part to control them.
Do you mind if we watch the small clip? I want to, because this is the part where he brings up Trump and Rogan and all that. So I just want to watch this quickly because I want to understand exactly what you mean so we can make some comments about it. So here, I'll just play this.
Media companies. This includes Disney, Viacom. This includes now Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. These are large media companies. Google, you can put in there also. You also have big news stations, CNN, Fox. And combined with this, now we have another group, social media influencers. This is like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, these characters who have come in, but they do not exist without support from these guys. If you notice, overnight, a bunch of social media influencers have come out of nowhere. And these people are created by these people. So when you look at this, the academics, the NGOs, the government, the think tanks, the investment companies, the Fed, the big pharma, the CEOs, the Hollywood celebrities, media, social media influencers, and the news companies, and you can even take the top 10 of each one of these, they all know each other, everyone. And in order to manipulate these people, they need front men to manipulate these people with policies. Because what comes out are policies. These are the inputs they put into the system, propaganda. They feed these people purposely, people who they tell them are going to save them, like the Elon Musks or Trump or the Kennedys. Now, who are the people part of the swarm that does that? They have the obvious establishment. And these people are like the Clintons or the McConnells or the Obamas or the Bushes or the Queen of England. Typically, people say, oh, yeah, those guys are part of the establishment. But one of the things we teach at Truth Freedom Health, the most insidious people are what I call the not so obvious establishment. These are the people that are created to make sure that the 8 billion people look to the elites to save them. Trump, he's got a golden toilet. Mar-a-Lago, Kennedy's, completely bogus family. You can look at historically people like Gandhi or people like MLK. These people all came and were endorsed by the swarm. These people do not exist. They live in Malibu. They live in the places of the elites. And these people are the ones that are used to send the inputs of this controller. In system science, these are the controllers. These are the people controlling the inputs that go in. And remember, their goal is to make sure people are in the state of division, disconnection, and helplessness, particularly.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying, bro. So he's kind of saying that the system has sort of fabricated a slew of people, right, who are sort of representing the system. But I agree with you. I don't think that's the case either. like Joe Rogan is not representing the system. I think what Dr. Shiva is trying to say is that people like Rogan, for example, they're getting money from the system, right? So I guess that the system is somehow being influential on them through means of money. Maybe that might be his point. That or maybe it's that Rogan's platform, like which he was on YouTube before and now he's on a Spotify, those platforms are supported by the system, right? So they're not like 100% like escaping from the system. And then he brings up, I think he said that the most insidious people are the front runners who put in these policies, right? And he named like Obama and the Clintons, and then underneath he named Trump, and he named not RFK, but his uncle,
the Kennedys.
JFK, the Kennedys, right? And then he mentions MLK, but I thought Martin Luther King. I mean, it's so that part I do agree with you with. I don't think he's portraying that part of his argument correctly, saying that, for example, MLK is a product of some, the system in some way, and he's influencing, or he's putting in these policies in place to sort of control. Or wait, maybe his point is that MLK, he sort of represented like he was representing Black people at the time, right? So maybe through him, there was a lot of division between Black and white people, because there was like an uprising, not like an uprising, but Black people were coming out with wanting more freedoms and equality, and maybe through that was this increase in division between white people and Black people in America during that time. Maybe that's his point.
Yeah. The way I interpreted it was like loosely and very broadly, obviously we'll lose a bit of the nuance here, but essentially everyone but him is establishment. And that was just the kind of vibe I got, like by outing all those, by mentioning all of those names, I was like, well, I personally, from what I've observed, don't see that same thing. Like, I think that what Rogan's done is fantastic, because he was willing to have open discussions and say like he didn't know stuff, and then say he did know stuff, but also be willing to be wrong about it. He was willing to have people on that other shows wouldn't have had on, give them a voice, and then listen, and that way you can hear that they're just a person with an experience in life as well. And that from the outside, you might think that they're this, but when you start to hear their story and understand them a bit better, you can understand that that's just a human experience. And that like in that situation, maybe I wouldn't have done any better or done worse, et cetera. But I think that he's done a lot to open up the discourse, right? To improve the diversity of discourse out there. So I don't really agree with that in that sense. Now, I understand in a sense, what he's saying is true, right? Like they are a part of the network. Like they're using the network to disseminate information to more people, right? If Rogan has, however many million followers, that means that he's a singular node that is connected to, X amount of million other people or nodes on that network. So he's a way to deliver a message. But I don't think, I think what Rogan puts out a good part of the time actually provides a counter narrative to what the system is trying to put out. So that's just one example of why I don't completely agree with him, and I think that he's biased. Obviously, I think what he's trying to do maybe is frame it in a way that like he's the only one that can be trusted because he's trying to run for president. Like he wants people to back it.
Yeah.
He's saying a lot of stuff that people will be like, becoming aware of and start to agree with, and then he's sort of manufacturing this problem, which is a real problem, and then manufacturing himself as the only solution, which is convenient, right? Given what he's trying to do.
And he's essentially building his entire argument on this swarm intelligence concept, right? So he can't really start providing examples that is sort of, going away from his concept. So I think he's just trying to find a way to include the Rogans and the RFKs and the Trumps into the system, into how it's, working together as a whole. And that's where his argument falls sort of short, right? Because you make a good point, because those guys aren't really necessarily part of the system per se, even though that they're reliant on the system in many ways, sort of like all of us are. They're not really for the system. And I don't think that they're essentially helping the system in the way that he may think that they are. And going back to what you said, he's sort of saying like, everybody is a part of the system except for me. So vote for me, 2024.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though he's in the system and is trying to run to get a power position in that system. So again, I'm not like, it sort of seems like he's trying to say like the system is this, this horrible thing, etc. It's like, well, we need some system, that's what collaboration and, that's what that's about. Collaboration is being able to form things greater than we could individually. Right. Like, so developing these connections and working relationships, and it allows us to create things greater than the sum of their parts.
I'm curious to what his plan is exactly, because if you're not funding your own campaign, like Trump or Vivek, you're sort of having to be a mouthpiece for some of these super PACs, right? Because I listened to Vivek explain this, and he was saying that individually, people can donate up to $6,600 to your campaign in like two separate $3,300 payments that occur at different times during your campaign. However, like big companies, big corporations can create these super PACs, and essentially these super PACs can donate. Sky's the limit, pretty much, right? So what ends up happening is that these super PACs feel like they have a say in what policies they want you to push and what they want you to say and how they want you to behave. So they'll give you the money, but they'll also give you like an email, like, by the way, we need you to support, X, Y, and Z, right? So I'm curious I understand how Vivek and Trump can get away from that because they're essentially supporting their own campaigns. But how is Dr. Shiva going to run a successful campaign or any campaign at all if he's not going to be accepting money from any business or corporations that is essentially the establishment? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but so that's part of the system. Like, so it becomes self-reinforcing. So it's the super PACs don't just think that they have a say; they know they have a fucking say because they have mad money and money talks, and like that's why they have a say, is because they've aggregated all of that monetary energy into into that collection of people or into that node, and then they can direct that. Right. So if you're willing to, say yes to what they're wanting to be pushed, well, then they'll give you the money. They'll help support your case. And I can understand, in a sense, you can justify it, like, well, I'll take their money, but I'm not going to do what they say. But then so you're in bed with the devil, so to speak. So that, like, the system is self-reinforcing in that way. Like it's, it's sort of, you can't really get into a position of power unless you go through some of the transformations that the system makes you go through to get there. And the reason that is because they don't want anyone to be able to get in there and go rogue. They want to have control. There's this other thing of like, people in these positions of power, I would wager that a good percentage of them have quite a lot of dirt on them. And you don't get into one of these positions unless other people can have dirt on you so that they know they can control you.
100%.
Like, someone with a clean slate probably isn't going to be able to get in currently. Now, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't know that just yet. It is how it tends to be.
These motherfuckers will put dirt on anybody, man. They'll hack your computer. They'll put some shit in your computer, and then they'll say, "Yeah, if you don't abide by the rules, guys, it's going to come out, and this is going to ruin your entire career."
Yes. So
if they wanted to, they could do it.
These motherfuckers. Do you think that it is like specific individuals, or do you think that it is like that in this power structure, the control system, that's kind of how it has to be. It's like a bit of an immune system, right? Like it sort of becomes a mutual,
I do think it's an immune system. I don't think someone's going to say, someone's going to call up some like lower level guy and be like, can you guys hack so-and-so's computer, put some pictures on his computer, of some fucked up shit. I think it's like someone at the bottom trying to make a name for themselves, and they might do that themselves. They might go rogue and they might forge an attack on somebody and then try and leverage that as a way to, get recognized amongst the elites and get in. That might be their way of getting through the door, for example, because like everybody is constantly thinking of ways of they can gain the system, they can make money, they can get someone's good book. So I think it's like an immune response effect where it's not essentially maybe sometimes people making coming up with these insidious plots and ideas, but it's other people trying to make a name for themselves, and they'll take it upon themselves to do something insidious in order to get recognized. Probably.
Yeah. So I thought about it slightly different, like from what you just said. I was thinking more along the lines of like, you have sort of the control group and then the controlled group, right? And then in the control group, it's controlled by the power of the group in a sense. And so if think of it like a cell, if it lets something in, that something being a person, right? And then that person threatens the survival and the power of that cell, well, then that cell will have mechanisms to sort of like stop that or push that person out or stop them from having that level of control over that whole collection of people or that cell. And so I was thinking of more of like a immune response like that. Like, so say somebody comes in and they're trying to be good, they don't have any dirt on them, or they're trying to do these things that will reduce the control group's power over the controlled group. Then the entire sort of system will self-organize to stop that one person being able to do that, to take that risk away, just because the group collectively is trying to sustain itself and maintain its control, if not grow its control.
That coincides much nicer with the immune response analogy, whereas mine didn't exactly coincide with like an immune response analogy. Yeah, I think what you're saying makes more sense. It seems more, well, probably both occur, right? It's probably more what you're putting forth, but there's for sure people out there
100%
plotting as well.
Yeah, we don't know exactly, but I was just trying to provide more of a general sort of way of thinking about it. Like, it might not be just individual people trying to do this. It literally is a sort of collective response with like no single person having the idea. It just ends up, that's what happens to people because it protects the power structure, right? It maintains, like everyone else is incentivized to maintain that power structure. If you get someone in that's willing to sort of burn it all down, well, then the power structure is not going to easily let that happen. And I don't think that it should, like this is just the nature of things. So as much as I enjoyed Shiva's talk, I think that it's, got some flaws and the rest of it, but it's interesting. And I think he does illuminate some true things. Okay. Now, this Super Hubs, the book by Sandra Navidi, is fascinating because it's essentially saying the same thing, but from a different reference frame or from a different abstraction. And she uses networks. Okay. So I have some key points about her, a short talk, but she also has this book called Super Hubs. And it's the financial system her hypothesis is the financial system is comprised of networks with influential individuals that she calls super hubs at the center, controlling flows of information and money. Super hubs derive power from their extensive connections across networks. The more multi-layered connections they have, finance, political, corporate, culture, etc., the more influence they wield. Connections are crucial for super hubs. Building relationships and emotional intelligence, not just IQ, is the key competitive advantage. Those who violate relationship norms can be expelled from the network. So that's like the immune system response, like, oh, this thing is not aligned with the collective's goal, so we're going to push it out. Homogeneity within networks reinforces superhubs' power as they connect with other powerful people from similar backgrounds. This can exclude outsiders. As networks get more homogeneous and interconnected over time, they become fragile and prone to collapse, as seen in the 2008 financial crisis. Superhubs optimize systems for themselves, disabling corrective mechanisms like regulation, which I don't 100% agree with. This leads to unsustainable, skewed systems vulnerable to backlash. The rise of figures like Donald Trump reflects a rebalancing of overly skewed and homogenous elite networks through populist backlash. But this disruption may just lead to redistribution among elites rather than systemic change. She says solutions require empathy and self-criticism from elites, but more pain may be needed before society develops caring systems beyond closed superhub networks.
So her expectation is that these elites will have a change of heart suddenly?
Well, yes, she's kind of hoping on that.
I mean, we are human, right? Like humans do have that capacity to have a change of heart, which is true, but it's kind of like a funny, I don't know. It's a beautiful thought. I don't know how likely that is, that they're, suddenly have a change of heart without any sort of...
Without an incentive to do so. I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
So the main thing I just want to talk about with her, like she's got a bunch of other talks and we're gonna weave these all together. A bunch of other points she makes. We'll weave them all together, including the pod we did last week about Bill Gurley's talk, which was fantastic. We're going to weave all of that together. So the main thing I wanted to get across was thinking about this in terms of networks, right? So you have nodes on the network. You and I are a node in the human network, right? We have a certain amount of connections to other people, and that can be our interconnectedness in the network, right? But if you think about there's 8 billion people, you think about the amount of people that you're sort of directly connected to via one or two relationships. It isn't that many, right? Like there's no way you have influence or power over many other nodes on the network, or a decent percentage of those nodes out of the 8 billion, is there? Right? However, what she brings up is these super hubs, and the way what she defines as a super hub is incredibly interconnected. So you can have, few people that may, control the regulation for certain businesses, or they own a giant company or a part of a giant company. That giant company distributes products to, hundreds of millions of people or billions of people globally, right? And that company, those people associated with that company are very interconnected into that network. They have a huge amount of influence and power over that network because of that connectedness. So essentially, these super hubs, or people of power. This is again, think of super hubs as the few that can control the many. All right, and so what she's saying is that the way that they do that is through that interconnectedness. They develop these power structures. They develop these mechanisms of distribution. This interconnectedness with them. Now, think of you have one group of people who are part of a multinational company. Right? And then they're friends with another group of people who have another multinational company. And so by them connecting to them, then then through one step, they have another connection that reaches even more people. And so you can see how much more interconnected the elite are and can be than the average person. And that's essentially where this control dynamic comes from, right? But I just think it's a nice way to think about it in terms of networks and interconnectedness. So what she says in her book is that the more interconnected a node becomes, the more central it becomes to that network. But then because that structure wants to continue getting more and more interconnected, right, wants to become more and more connected, it ends up sort of becoming almost fully connected, which is very homogeneous, right? So it's completely interconnected, so to speak. And then it becomes very fragile. So as it becomes more and more interconnected, it gains more and more power. Then it keeps getting more and more interconnected, and it starts to become very fragile. And so it's like these cycles.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Well, that's that same thing with Gurley, whereas regulatory capture benefits the incumbent.
Yeah.
Right? Is they start to put in these rules, they elicit more and more control. But because they've cut off the feedback mechanisms, right, they can't get that feedback. They can't see what they're doing is wrong or isn't going to lead to anything beneficial. It's just consuming more and more power. It doesn't have the best interest of the people. Then that starts to become very fragile. So again, remember, there always has to be this tension between order and chaos. And so as that network gets more and more interconnected, it gets more and more control, more and more order over that system, which leads to fragility causing the chaos, right? Because there can't be complete, like having complete control is not a good thing, because no one thing can know everything. And so you can think that what you're controlling for is the best thing, but you can have these, like black swan events or things that you didn't know that can happen, right? So it over-fragilizes the system. But by having that balance between order and chaos, there is some amount of chaos that's happening, which, stops us from having all our eggs in one basket. But the more and more control that gets had, it's like putting more and more of your eggs in one basket. That kind of makes sense? And then all it takes is one thing to knock your basket and you lose all your eggs. Whereas if your eggs are in many different baskets, if one thing happens and you knock a basket, you've only lost an egg or two, you don't lose all the eggs. Trying to make that
yeah,
that's
a nice analogy. Yeah, I get that. If we think about history, could we say that that's likely what happened to the Roman Empire, to the Greek Empire?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a meme going around at the moment, which is like, have you been thinking about the Roman Empire? And because that's what the people are saying, this is essentially what's happening with the US. Like this is the rise and the decline now.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah.
Right? When the Roman Empire started, coming out with like multiple genders, and people started like really exploring their sexuality and doing a whole bunch of, I don't know, like just obnoxious type behaviors, is when their society started falling, essentially. Some historians actually bring that up, that happened to the Roman Empire and to the Greek Empire as well. Did you hear that?
Yes. Yeah. So this is what I was alluding to before about this is just a cycle of systems. Like these are cycles that happen within systems. And it's not like we're ever going to solve this, so we're never going to have to worry about it. No, this is going to be something that is continuous. We're going to always need to have this tension between control and chaos, or order and chaos. Sorry, right? And in a sense, I think it's quite beautiful. But it means that we as people need to become aware of these things, and to understand that there will be times when it's more important to become aware of them. There will be times when you can trust the system a little bit more, maybe not even trust, but have good explanations as to why the system is doing what it's doing. But like there are advantages, right? There are advantages to having a system that takes control of certain things. It means you don't have to worry about it, right? But then if you get too dependent upon that, then you lose your ability to critically think. Then you become dependent on the system. Whereas there's a balance between the two, where you want to have some dependency on the system, but not all of your dependencies on the system. Because if all of your dependencies are on the system, then they can almost totally control you. Whereas if you only have some interdependencies or dependencies on that system, then you're not fully controllable. But the system's goal is to get full control of you. Right? You have to understand that that's the system's goal, right? And it needs to be our goal as people to sort of resist that to some degree.
Yeah, my concern is that when the pendulum has already shown signs of swinging back the other way, and what occurs, what will what is happening and what will continue to happen is that many people will come out who are combating the system, combating the left, combating the establishment, but doing it in sort of in a negative way, not doing it in a way where we can make systemic change positive. I think that things will also come, like, I think things will get, I don't know if they'll get worse in a sense, but how can I put this? Like, what I'm worried is that people will cause like an uprising, right? And I don't want to say civil war, but it's almost like, but it could almost get to that point because people are angry and they're losing their patience. And because everything is just online right now with social media, everything's in your face all the time. There's more and more groups of people getting angry at the system and at the establishment, and they might actually go about making change in the wrong way. So that's kind of like my concern, because what needs to happen is that we need to abolish like this left and right bullshit and just go back to what are fundamental principles that are important to all of us, right? And some of those principles, I think, need to be family. We need to go back to thinking about, what it is to have a good family, what it is to be a good husband or a good father, good mother, or a good wife, and be proud of where you live. Be proud of your country. If you're from Canada, America, or Australia, that you raise that flag, right? And we're not raising multiple flags. If you're a Canadian, that all Canadians fall under the Canadian flag, and people need to go back to being proud, to being Canadian, and then also proud of working as well, of their job. And we need to stop thinking about racism, about sexualities, about genders, just about bullshit that essentially is just dividing us. And we need to go back to those fundamentals, like family, and pride. God, why are you fucking laughing, guy? I'm serious.
No, I know. I like what you were saying there. I know, because I thought you were going to make new points, and then you just said family again, and I was like, oh, look, I agree. We need to breed for sure. But okay, so I just want to push back on a couple little things. You said we need to have pride in our country. Like, yeah, but not fake pride. It's got to be real pride. So, like, you got to do the things. You got to develop. You got to be a part of a country that you're proud of. Like, again, we need to take more ownership. I think that it's common for this sort of like blame to sort of fall into this conversation about like, it's the system's fault. It's not, it's us against them. Well, yes, in a sense that is true, but it isn't necessarily the system's fault. It's just what control systems do. They want to get more and more power. Like, and it's about maintaining the balance between them, I think. And you mentioned like, will it get to this civil war point of view or whatever? If it needs to, it will. And in all seriousness, that isn't a bad thing. It might be a bad thing in a sense that it could have been avoidable, but it's probably like necessary in a sense if it gets too bad, right? Like if it gets too bad, then that's how people end up expressing themselves. This is why, protests and things need to be allowed in civilizations, because it's a necessary feedback mechanism. It's a feedback mechanism from the people to the power structures to let them know, like, hey, you're going too far, right? Like, you're going too far. There was another couple of things I wanted to touch on there. So one really quick one is, this is why it's important for, this is why we can't completely do away with guns, right? This is a very important thing. So if a population isn't allowed to bear arms, then they can easily be controlled by a power structure that does have arms, okay? Now, this is where you get this debate with other people like, but guns kill people. Well, yes, they definitely can. And if we had no guns, then there wouldn't be any of these shootings and all the rest of it. Yes, but then we would also be more susceptible to other mechanisms of control. And so you can't have it perfect. You can't have a society where no one is ever harmed, where no one has any risk, right? That would also be homogeneity, which would be incredibly dangerous. Okay, so we have to embrace some level of uncertainty. We can't have complete certainty. We can't have complete safety. We also can't have complete chaos and complete uncertainty. It's a balance. It's a trade-off. Okay, and that's this continuous message I just want to keep sort of reiterating, because I think that's what polarizes people. Is it's like it has to be all this way or it has to be all this way. It's like, no, it's this delicate balance between the two. And that's the same as when you say get rid of the left or the right and the rest of it. It's like understanding that no, it's not necessarily the left or the right. It's somewhere in the middle. More of that centrist kind of approach. And these are all things that we're going through and learning about and developing experience with in real time. So we can't ever be perfect either. And there is no such thing as perfect, really. But yeah, look, I agree with you in terms of focusing on the family. I think that's what Dr. Shiva mentions is become a local leader, right? Be the change you want to see locally, right? Start to be that, right? And don't get caught in the trap of being it's the power, it's the establishment's fault, it's this, it's that, or whatever, blaming them. Because all you're doing when you blame is you're just giving them more control over you, as opposed to taking ownership and being like, hey, I've done these things that's allowed that control to seep into my life, and I've become interdependent. And then, minimizing that for you locally, if we all did that, then that would globally have a big effect. But we're also taught by education systems and other social systems that we are powerless and that we're only just one person. We're only just one little thing. We're not as interconnected as they are, and all of these other things, which can be true, but it doesn't have to be true.
You want to see the conclusion to Dr. Shiva's video?
Yeah, go for it, and then we can intertwine all of these together.
All these pharma companies are making big money from obesity drugs, but there's movies on Netflix and Amazon promoting fat people as a norm. What's happening over here, you have people who are pro-fat and people who are anti-fat people. You have people pro-woke and anti-woke, and they don't care. So you have a bunch of these idiots writing books against woke companies and anti-woke companies. You have people creating apps, only shop at anti-woke companies, don't go to woke companies. But you guys understand that these guys don't give a damn? They're making money anyway. The investment bankers are going to make money from woke companies and anti-woke companies. But what's occurring here is people are being divided. These guys are happy because they're inputting policies and propaganda. People here are being divided, and that is the goal, to achieve power, profit, control. So as long as these people work together as a swarm to control the policies and the propaganda, and they provide false heroes, and they're using the Trumps, the Kennedys, and Gaudis, all of them who talk a big game, their goal is to make sure that you never understand this, that you keep thinking, oh, Kennedy's going to solve the problem. Trump is going to solve the problem. They don't want you to be leaders in your own communities. They want you to outsource your future to people like Trump or Kennedy because they're part of the swarm. And you keep getting more unhealthy, more ignorant, more entertained. But most importantly, you are divided.
Yes, great points. Really good points. I don't completely agree with some of it, but broadly, yes, I think he's correct in saying that.
No, I agree. And you made me realize the part where he's likely incorrect about where he names, these false heroes. I don't think they are false heroes in a sense. Because if someone can open up our eyes to the way the system is functioning, because some of the people that he's named have done that. Like RFK is doing that. Rogan has done that. Vivek is now doing that. Trump has done it. So in a way that's actually against the system, against the establishment, and it's beneficial to us. So we can understand that is what they're doing, because that is essentially have been the message from them, right? Is this open course discussion, so we can sort of get understanding of how things look under the hood. And with that is, that's knowledge, and knowledge is powered. So I think that these false heroes that he states, I wouldn't say that they're false heroes in a sense, because they were able to, sort of identify a lot of these issues. And his point about being like a leader in your local community, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I'm the same. So look, I agree. I don't think that they're completely, or it's completely accurate to say that they're false heroes. because like you mentioned that they have brought awareness to certain things, and he's also bringing awareness to certain things. But again, I think like one good point that he does make is like, don't just fully put your trust in them and expect that what they're going to do is going to change anything. Like that's a false hope.
Yeah, that's right.
Taking responsibility for yourself. That's the biggest, single greatest thing that you can do. Becoming a local leader, being the change that you want to see locally is possibly the most powerful. Well, it is the most powerful thing you can do. And by doing so, then you can start to organize a bit better as the many. And I think that's really powerful because and look, when he says the false heroes and he mentions those names, I think it's just, convenient that he's leaving off your Bidens and the whole other side of the spectrum. It seems to be very more focused towards the right as opposed to the left. And
that's
so
true.
In saying that, right, Trump did say that he wanted to clean the swamp. He reckons it's become insidious. And then look at what happened to him, right? He was elected president, and from day one, he was under attack by the establishment immune system. So to me, that's a bit more of a signal that like what he was actually trying to do was threatening the establishment, because the establishment's immune system kicked in overtime and he was just under attack 24/7 from every fucking direction. Because they're like, yo, this guy is threatening our control structure. This guy is threatening our power over all of this, right? And I think that's pretty obvious. You look at your Russell Brands and your even your Robert F. Kennedy. They're attacking him. The immune system is kicking in as well. And so I think that yes, he mentions them as being these false heroes, but I think that might not be completely accurate.
Rubes, if we were to sort of give a framework to people of what the initial steps could be, of how they could start, carrying out some of these things, to sort of go against the establishment, would you agree that step one would be simply ignoring media and doing your own research as step one?
Broadly, yeah. I would say mainstream stuff, right? So understand that power structures have mechanisms of distribution, and you can call that sort of your legacy media. They're the most entrenched and probably most under control. So yeah, by broadly minimizing your consumption of that, or even completely, stopping your consumption of that is step number one towards a bit more freedom.
The awakening. Step one towards the awakening.
And then the next one you were saying, there was two in that first point you made. I just focused on the first
do
bit.
your own research.
Yeah. And so, okay, really important thing, right? Do your own research. Okay. So then you could read any number of articles that are produced by, or incentivized by these agencies or by these media groups or journalists, right? So what I've found to be really useful is whenever you read something that, promotes one thing, go and find the exact opposite. Find something that completely contradicts it. And essentially what that's doing is it's kind of giving you like your boundaries, right? Like one extreme and then the other extreme. And then understand that whatever's, true or useful is probably somewhere in between there, right? Or those two extremes might completely cancel each other out and it's a nothing. But by being able to see the variance, by being able to see one side and then the other side, or one extreme view versus the other extreme view, it allows you to develop a more holistic understanding. That can be hard to do because if we read something that confirms a prior belief, right, we instantly want to believe that. It reinforces our current belief. And so it's typically very difficult to go and look at something or ingest information or read something or learn about something that contradicts a belief that we hold dearly to us. And so this is where this sort of meta skill comes in about being able to hold beliefs loosely and temporarily dispel a strongly held belief to try on a different perspective or the inverse of it. And then to be able to simultaneously have both of those in your mind at once to see that space.
Yeah.
Does it break your brain?
I'm just trying to think of what would be the following steps.
Firstly, the next step would be believe that you can make a difference. But understand that difference probably starts locally. And that it's not about trying to, from your one point, trying to affect everyone. No, you just try and make a local difference. Become less dependent on these control structures. Understand what the control structures are. And, the big ones are, money, media, or content consumption, or information. So, money, information, healthcare, and then belief structures like, political parties and religions and all of those other things. They're also mechanisms for control. And we need some, but too much is very bad and dangerous.
I think we're good.
You just ran out of shit to say?
Yeah. Actually.
I have one thing to wrap it all up, right?
All right. Nice.
So last week we did a pod on Bill Gurley and regulatory capture and how regulatory capture benefits the incumbents or benefits the power structure. And so we did a bit of a talk on Dr. Shiva's stuff today. We did a little bit of stuff on Super Hubs, which is a great book. Again, we'll link to in the description. Please check it out. A fascinating book. It really illuminated so many things to me when I read it. So I just wanted to sort of weave those kinds of things together. So there are some concepts discussed by all three of those people that overlap, right? So detail on elite control. All three of these people highlight how powerful networks of influential insiders or elites exert control. Navidi's financial super hubs, Gurley's regulatory capture by special interests, and Shiva's obvious and not so obvious establishment swarm. These elite networks concentrate power, wealth, and access among themselves. They operate across public and private sectors, joining government, business, finance, media, and others. Impacts on the masses. The elite networks implement self-serving policies that harm the broader public, such as distorted regulations, Gurley, neoliberal policies, Shiva, and financial system contagion, Navidi. These elite-driven systems grow increasingly skewed over time, concentrating power and wealth. This leads to backlash from the excluded masses, and I would say the over-fragilization of the system. Need for a systemic change. All three indicate the solution is dismantling elite control systems via transparency from Gurley, public awakening from Shiva, and self-criticism by insiders, Navidi. But entrenched elite networks resist losing power, Gurley notes. Implementing reforms like transparency is challenging. Shiva positions himself as a leader, taking on the elite swarm, similar to Gurley's maverick critique of regulatory capture. Both position themselves as rare truth tellers. In summary, all three describe the risks of concentrated power in elite networks across spheres like finance, government, and business. These insider systems frequently operate against public interest. They prescribe systemic solutions to disrupt the status quo, but note the challenge given elite resistance. So the elites aren't going to want this, right? The people also don't want those levels of control. And so you can't just rely on them, right? We have to take responsibility. We have to start taking ownership. And while we're still whenever we're blaming the elites or these people for doing that, we reinforce the problem. So again, I think number one is take ownership. Realize the power that you can have if you start to take ownership for things. If you want to say, but the media is forcing this down my throat, turn it off, right? You have power, you have control. Start to elicit it. Start to weave it between your local network. Start to empower others. Start to have more conversations about control mechanisms. Don't get angry at it, right? Try to understand it so that you can either circumvent it, you can resist it, or you can propose different solutions to these problems. But I love this kind of thing. I love becoming aware of it. I love expanding my horizons and my understanding, because for most of my life, none of this stuff made any sense. And I spent a lot of time, being upset or angry or frustrated, all of these other things. But the more that I learned, the more that I started to be able to see the differing opinions, that one extreme viewpoint and then the other extreme viewpoint, the more calming it really was and the more empowering it really was. And so I think knowledge is power in that regard. So seek to build more knowledge about how these things emerge in systems, or how they're just natural parts of systems, right? And it's not that we shouldn't be upset that we have to push back. No, it's part of our duty if we want to maintain our freedoms to push back. And it's a beautiful thing. That's what I think. But yeah, that's all I got to say now.
I agree. It's time that people do take responsibility and stop putting the blame on everybody else. And I like your perspective, because you're the type of guy that's very positive. That's not the right word. Very optimistic, and also, you're also a very positive person too. But I think for everybody else who might not have the same mindset that you might have, it's fine to feel frustrated, right? Through this process. Like, I feel frustrated sometimes. And so I think that's just like part of growing and part of change is feeling frustrated, and use that frustration to sort of turn into a positive thing, or use it in a positive way, because the shit that is happening is kind of annoying too, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And
you will feel,
yeah,
there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You will feel frustrated if you still inherently have some blame that you're imposing. Like, it shouldn't, or if you think that it should be different, you're like, it shouldn't have to be this way. I shouldn't have to, then you will feel frustrated. But as soon as you own the fact that you are an integral part of this system as well, then a lot of that frustration goes away. And the more ownership you take, and the less blame you cast, or the less blame you throw out, then the less frustration you end up having. That's what I've found for myself personally. But yeah, great pod.
Yeah,
hey?
Fuck yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I was losing focus around it at the end there. I don't know if you noticed.
Definitely. No, there's lots of things to think about. It's a tough.
Yeah, I don't know why.
This is pretty. It's interesting, but it's very high level as well. Again, our goal here is to go over these things in more detail with further episodes of this kind of stuff, and learn how to present it better. Like, I don't know how to articulate these things, super effectively yet. This is all sort of, emerging for me too. But I think these sort of frameworks, I think, you can conceptually start to develop a better understanding. But yeah, if you got nothing else to say, Guy.
Well, the best way to let us know that we're complete fucking idiots is by subscribing to the channel, giving a like on the video, writing a comment, talk some shit, explain to us why we might be idiots specifically, and share the video with your nemesis, friends.
Yep.
All right, bro. Well done.
And if you want to leave a comment down below about potential solutions or things that you found that were useful for you, or maybe even some frustrations that you have that we could think through together, then feel free to do so. And thank you very much for tuning in, Guy. Have a lovely night. Enjoy. Peace, love,
I love you, bro.
Happiness, and control.
Sounds good, Guy. All right, peace.
Bye.
Bye.